I actually feel it's based off circumstances. I don't think anybody would choose poverty. I mean, I don't know what kind of choice that would be.
It's definitely like a multi-headed serpent that you're dealing with here. There's not just one answer that you could just like magically, make everything go away with.
I think we need a lot of more people to lift people up and to walk with them through their situations to get them out of poverty.
What other questions have you guys heard from people asking if they maybe do have a misconception or they just are interested in learning more? Go ahead.
Yeah. I think over the years of interfacing with volunteers who are willing to impact poor people's lives, they ask questions such as, why are women having multiple kids by different men? And that's always seems to be the normal question. And then when I share about my past of growing up in poverty and the Lord just pouring into my life through His people, and people ask questions. So, how did you get out? How was it possible for you experiencing poverty, losing my dad? My dad was murdered when I was 10 years old, and the question of, well, we know that people are in poverty for generations. And how was it that you were able to get out of it? So that's a major question that people asking me based on my history.
Yeah.
And what's your answer?
Yeah, it's the grace of God. It's God using people whom He's raised up to pour into my life and have established life-on-life relationships. And of course, another part of that has been I have the willingness to take advantage of opportunities. So poor people are not always have access to a better life, to better resources. And I was one of the fortunate ones, not only did God send people to me, but I was willing to embrace and to do life with folk that wanted to help me. Mm-hmm. So I had a part to play.
Yeah. I actually use your story occasionally and talk about a friend of mine. And, I remember you telling your story in detail and talking about the two gentlemen, or the one particular gentleman who worked for the one organization, and how he poured his life into you. And I tell people all the time, nothing happens outside of a relationship, no significant learning, no significant growth. And anytime I meet somebody that's broken the cycle of poverty, this is truly from generational poverty. It's usually a person I admire because they've done more than I have with what God has, or with what the opportunities that they've had, I think. But invariably, I've never heard a story that didn't have one person, sometimes two, sometimes three, that made a difference. It was this person. It could be a teacher,
absolutely.
But only if that teacher really has a long-term relationship with the child.
That's the key.
And it can be an uncle, it can be an aunt, it can be a friend, it can be somebody who just loves the Lord and is committed to pouring himself into other people. But ultimately, it's about relationships.
Absolutely.
And you don't meet somebody who's broken the cycle of poverty unless they've had that in their lives. Sometimes it's just a mother who just says, I'm not going to let you fail.
Yeah.
And I think within those relationships, it's quite challenging. You have to be in it for the long haul. It gets rough at times. And honestly, poor people in general, anyone in general, I think, I would say they don't trust people that they don't know. And so you have to build some relational capital. And that means you got to spend some time doing some hard life with them. And sometimes they don't want to talk to you, or sometimes they don't trust you and they don't feel like you have their best interests at heart. And you have to weather the storms. And as you were able to show that you are committed to working with the poor, walking with the poor, then they open up to feeling more comfortable about sharing their pains. And then they allow you to come a little closer to their world. But I also think it's important for there to be some reciprocity, where there's some exchange, where even those who were helping the poor could be vulnerable to say that, hey, you know what, I don't have it all together. And I think poor people need to see that. So they don't see themselves as a project, right? Or someone's pet project, if you will. But being able to say, hey, you have struggles just like I have struggles, and how can we do life together? I think that is so important.
I remember when we first moved, back to your first point, when we first moved into the Martindale-Brightwood neighborhood, we were white people moving into a predominantly, almost all African-American community, a poor community. And there was an incident we'd lived there for 6 months, and my son had just been born, and a bullet came through the house. And it scared us, as you might imagine. And my wife, who's always the first to remind me that Satan exists, said, maybe it's just Satan trying to scare us away. And, we just, after lots of existential angst and stuff, we decided to stay. Years later, I didn't tell anybody in the neighborhood about it, but there was one boy from the ministry who was at the house that day. Well, years later, we found out that he had told everybody in the neighborhood about this bullet that came through the street's house. And his mother told us years later that everybody in the neighborhood was always talking about us, and we're, just sort of had this informal bet about how long we'd stick around.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when they heard about the bullet, they were all like, well, they're leaving tomorrow. And she said, then the moving truck didn't show up. And she said, that's when you got accepted by the neighborhood.
Instant credibility.
Because instant credit, but it was investment. I'm here
Yes,
no
yes.
matter what happens, and I'm going to live and that's what that ministry was all about, which is I'm going to make my personal interest the same as the personal interest of my neighbor. So as I advocate for my kids, for better schools, I'm advocating for better schools for my neighbor's kids, and when I can tie my interests into your interests, then I can act selfishly. I can act like a normal parent would want to, because not only am I helping my own children, I'm helping my neighbor's children as well. And so, but we got that capital. That I think what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good, and we developed that capital with our neighbors because we didn't leave. So.
And it goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
And it takes a long time sometimes.
Oh, it does.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
I've been mentoring a kid for almost 8 years, and he's still. I think trust is still an issue, but I think, and what we tell a lot of our mentors in the program is, the fact that you come every week and show up and talk and hang out makes a ton of difference. So even if he's not saying it and he's not thanking you for coming, and but he just, I'll ask questions and, what are you getting in my business for? And it's like, because I care about you and I want to find out about you, but it's just that long-term relationship that, like you were saying, that if any relationship has to be over a long period of time. Yeah. And the other thing that stood out to me when you were talking was that everybody has something to contribute. And I think when it's the reciprocity that you talked about, and I think that's a huge part of someone breaking the cycle, is realizing that they have something to give back.
Yes.
And it's not all one-sided. I'm coming to, somebody's going to come give me everything, but I have something to give back. And sometimes it's something, monetarily, sometimes it's volunteering, but I've just seen that breakthrough happen with some people when, even kids are doing service projects. Kids at Shepherd are doing service projects, and they're collecting food bags for kids at another school in the neighborhood, and maybe those food bags are usually going to them, but in this case, they get to give back, and I think that's a huge switch in mindset.
Yeah. And it gives them value.
Oh yeah.
It helps them to know that they have something to bring to the table, and that they are contributors, and that's important to know. It helps with their identity, with who they are in Christ or in their family, in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
I remember when Shepherd first we wanted to make sure we served milk to all the kids at the academy, and we didn't have a source, and we started asking the parents to bring a gallon of milk a week. And I just remember how much pride they had walking that in, because they were contributing. I mean, they were paying for the school, not much obviously, but then there was more that they could add.
Yeah.
But your earlier point reminded me of a story Dan Fuller told, I remember, about one of the first mentors at Shepherd that he matched with a kid who came to him and said, I've gone to this house, I've set up a time to pick up the kid 5 times, and all 5 times I rang the doorbell and nobody's home. And Dan said, just keep going back, and eventually the kid was home one of the times, and the mentor said later he found out that the kid had been home every time, peeking through the curtains, and he realized it was just a test. Are you going to keep showing up? But he passed the test, and he earned his trust. Well, I don't know if it was complete trust, but he certainly earned that capital. That this guy's going to keep showing up, so I might as well go do something with him.
Absolutely. That's a good story.